Train operators of Reddit, what's the strangest, creepiest thing you've seen on the tracks? I'm an engineer, but not a train engineer. My company does computer network consulting for lots of train operators, including one of the underground subway train operators here in the UK. The computer department at this train company were all massive geeks, often developing their own systems and solutions to assist and automate a lot of the manual tasks carried out on the tracks. One system they developed would log where each train stopped at the platform, whether it overshot or undershot where it was supposed to, and log this all to graphs in their IT control center. One day, they noticed that every train at one station was overshooting, only by a couple of feet, but they were all stopping slightly further down the platform than they were supposed to. They initially thought maybe the sensor had become misaligned and was reading incorrectly. So they managed to convince the management to delay the trains for a few minutes so someone could jump down onto the tracks and realign the sensor. What they actually found was something very different. At some point during the previous night, a homeless guy had snuck onto the platform, walked down the service ramp alongside the tracks, well past where the public should be, and just outside of the CCTV camera coverage. He set himself up to sleep next to the air vent of one of the machine rooms, probably because of the warm air coming out. Unfortunately, at some point in the night, he rolled or slipped from where he was sleeping and was hit and killed by one of the service trains running through. No one noticed. The reason all the trains were overshooting the platform, the trains were going through the mess left over from the accident and sliding onto the bits of homeless guy. That was the day I learned the term red lubricant. The next project we were involved with was adding more CCTV cameras. Not a conductor myself, but my commute to my campus is a 2-lane highway that runs parallel to a train track. And it has one crossing where the road and the track meet at an angle that basically forms a really squished X shape. One night me and my cousin were carpooling back home from a midterm and we were both pretty tired. A combination of exhaustion from those stressful midterms and the obvious weariness from the late night drives. We were just doing our normal drive home when we were about to hit the railroad crossing. From a distance, I noticed that there was an unusually bright light oncoming from the railroad track, but considering that the crossing lights weren't blaring and the arms weren't coming down, I figured that it was just a maintenance truck that was inspecting the track at night when it wouldn't be too busy. So I kept driving, considering there was no real reason to stop. In my mind, the railroad lights would be flashing red if there really was a train coming through. But as we drew closer, it became more and more apparent that these headlights were moving really fast and didn't have the intent of stopping. That's when we heard a large horn blare at us from the tracks. And with that, I slammed on the brakes and stopped just a few feet away from a one-way train ride to purgatory. Me and my cousin nearly pissed ourselves that night. We spent the rest of the drive arguing over whether the lights were on and we didn't notice them because we were tired, or if I was just a bad driver. The crazy thing is, when we were driving back the next morning, there was a crazy traffic accident at the highway that caused a massive buildup. It turned out that a car performed a sudden brake in front of the railroad crossing and caused the 4 cars behind it to rear-end one another. The local radio station was reporting on the accident, and it was revealed that the lead driver slammed the brakes when he noticed a train about to use the railroad crossing, even though the crossing arms were still up and the lights weren't going off. Luckily, no one was severely injured. I'm an engineer now, but as a conductor, I was walking my train one midnight, lacing air hoses, getting the cars, freight, ready to pull. I noticed what I thought was a dog or coyote about 100 yards away. No big deal. I have an aluminum and steel stick with a hook for cranking brakes without having to climb onto the cars. Then I noticed it kind of tracing along, pacing me. I could see the glow of its eyes watching me. Later, as we're ready to depart, I'm out in front of the engine, opening the track switch to get on the main line. I'm in the engine's headlights, and I hear my engineers say quietly over the radio, "Calmly walk up to the engine. If I blow the whistle, run." I'm thinking, oh geez, it's just a coyote. No big deal, and I keep working. But he starts flashing the cab lights, so I think maybe there's a manager stalking us. So I go up there. He has me close the nose door and points out a giant mountain lion perched up on a berm 20 feet from where I was, casually sprawled out, staring dead at us. This was in northern Iowa, so pretty uncommon. That and a bunch of junkies and drunks around the yards. I was a young transportation supervisor trainee for a railroad. It was my first month in intercity Detroit. It was about 3 a.m., and I had to help inspect a train car that was having trouble moving. It was winter, and the brakes wouldn't release. The guy I was training with dropped me off at one end of the train, and I started walking towards the locomotives. About 20 cars into the train, I started hearing footsteps on the other side. I would turn my lantern off and wait a few seconds, and they would stop. This repeated for about 10 minutes as I walked towards the locomotives. It eventually stopped when I met up part of the train crew. I'm sure it was nothing, probably a coyote or stray dog, but I was freaked out. Not an operator, but this totally counts. My best friend lives on a rural private road that crosses two of the most active rail lines in my part of the state. There have been at least 3 accidental deaths from auto train collisions, but a year ago 2 cars crossed the tracks right before a train. The first car had a middle-aged mom in it. She speeds over the tracks. The second car had her son and his girlfriend, mid-20s. The second car darts in front of the train and is obliterated. NTSB, sheriff, and BNSF arrive to investigate. The mother is hysterical, crying, saying, "He was right behind me the whole time." They originally thought it was just another unfortunate case of someone trying to outrun the train, until they discovered the mom and son are from a city over an hour away. No one locally knew them. They didn't have permission to be on the private road. And then they found that the girlfriend had been dead for hours. They suspected the mom was helping her murderer son try to find a dump spot to dispose of the body. I don't know if it counts or not, but I used to do modifications for trains and rewires, and then test them and drive them about a mile to terminal. That took them and drove them back to where they needed to go. Most of the time, we would walk back after dropping them off, since we were hourly and had a private track, until where we dropped it off, so there wasn't danger of getting ran over. On the way back there was a big puddle with a decent-sized fish swimming in it. There wasn't a lake anywhere on the property, and it never flooded for one to swim there. Me and the guy I work with figured a bird must have dropped it there, or someone put it there, because we couldn't imagine any other way it got there. My dad was a train driver for most of his life. We live in the Netherlands, where towns are really close by each other, so a train would go back and forth multiple times a day, sometimes even every hour. So early one morning, he spots a person sitting on the train tracks. You can't really stop a train, so he radios it in for others to keep an eye out. On the return trip, he slows down as he passes the spot and notices the person is wearing pajamas. It was still very early at this point. On the following pass-up again, he slows the train down to a crawl, and for sure, the person is still sitting there. So Dad stops the train, announces to the early morning commuters that there is a slight technical problem, and gets out to walk to the person. Turns out the person was a patient of the nearby mental institution and was going to plan to commit suicide by train. So Dad convinces him not to and takes him back to the institution. He apparently said something like, "Hey, are you missing a patient because I found him or her?" I don't remember the gender. He gets back on his train, announces the technical issues are solved, and continues working for the day. My dad was a great guy.